Ah, I see you missed your big sister.
My what? Fire Emblem Fates, the game that collectively made Fire Emblem fans pee their pants when it was announced. It followed Fire Emblem Awakening, an overwhelmingly successful game that reintroduced the series to Western audiences after leaving many confused who these blue-haired sword guys were on the Smash roster.
My friends.
Fates was a huge leap from Awakening. While Awakening at least took place in the same world that Marth came from and allowed new players to connect to the older games without having to emulate them, Fates introduced all new characters and 2, technically 3, entirely new countries with entirely new histories. Sure, there was the weird connection between Ylisse and Nor through weird timeline shenanigans with Inigo, Owain, and Severa, and the shoe-in connection of Nor and Hoshido being myths in Ylisse, known as the Black and White Kingdoms, but besides that, Fates is a completely standalone game in the series. Since it didn't require players to sort through previous games in the franchise, Fates acted as a starting point for many new players to get into the series. With all these babies suddenly interested in the game, a sort of stigma was created that Fates was terrible, and anyone who defended it clearly didn't know the series. You know, kinda like what's going on with the new fans of Five Nights at Freddy's and the recent release of Security Breach. I'm here to argue that, although many think that the plot of Fire Emblem Fates is half-baked at best, a legitimately good game sits behind fan service-filled cutscenes and an $80 paywall. To start, let's talk about the mechanics. Fates improves upon the battle mechanics introduced in Awakening that many felt were unbalanced. The guard stance feature, once known as pair up in Awakening, is now more about actively choosing between whether you want to take an offensive strategy or a defensive one, depending on which characters you pair up. Having units pair up provides better stat boosts than units standing on adjacent tiles. Stat boosts are increased further if the paired up units have higher support. Higher support increases the chance of blocking oncoming attacks as well, which is shown by the shield icons on the touchscreen. Moving on, unlike in Awakening, the second-gen characters are completely optional. In Awakening, it was kind of a struggle to beat the game without the support of the child characters, but in Fates, you really don't need to play a single paralog in order to beat the game, since the roster you're given is just as stacked as it needs to be. The story of the second-gen characters also just makes sense in Fates. Awakening's way of dealing with the second-gen characters felt unnatural and unnecessary. It made sense for Lucina to come back in time since she's a main character and all, but it feels like the only reason the other kids were added onto that was so that the roster could be fluffed out a little bit more. The reasoning for being in the story didn't exist, and their absence would make Lucina's story all the more heart-wrenching. None of the other characters are expanded upon in a meaningful way, nor do they affect the plot. In Fates, however, while the second-gen characters don't affect the plot, they legitimately affect one another. A big critique of Fates is its writing, especially in its support conversations, but the supports between the child units all have some level of social awkwardness and this sort of disconnect from their parents, due to how they were raised in the Deep Realms. That's a parallel dimension that the kids grew up in for you newbies. The children's supports with their parents also explore how they were all abandoned during the war and the long-lasting effect that had on them. A minor point is also that the Deep Realms explain a little bit of how the Outrealm Gate works outside of Fire Emblem Heroes. Now, in order to get the full story of Fates, you need to play all 3 routes. Most people wouldn't want to drop a good $80 on one game, but that's the thing. Fates isn't just one game. Each route is its own unique story. Sure, the first 5 chapters or so are the same, but the game developers thought of that, and you can skip right to the route division the next time you start a new file. Generally, Birthright is thought of as easy mode. Map objectives are almost always root the enemy, and you can pay gold to replay maps and grind your units up to be absolutely OP. A lot of maps feel very samey for this reason, since it's all the same end goal. Conquest is considered hard mode. Map objectives vary. Sometimes it's rooting the enemy, sometimes it's defeating a boss, but other times it's defending specific spots on the map for a certain amount of turns, or reaching a specific part of the map in a limited amount of turns, or clearing the map without losing a certain unit. Noteworthy Maps in Conquest are the port defense map from Chapter 10, where you have to defend 4 map tiles for 11 turns while enemies are coming at you from all sides, and the Wind Tribe map from Chapter 20, which uses wind tunnels to move your units across wide gaps every few turns. These maps require strategy, so you don't get your behind handed to you 2 turns in. They're considered some of the most well-designed maps in all of Fire Emblem. Revelation, the true story of Fates, is a good middle ground, considered normal mode. It combines goal requirements from both Birthright and Conquest, so the maps vary enough to be memorable. It also allows for grinding by paying gold, like in Birthright. The maps themselves aren't often reused from the other two routes, and employ a lot more dragon veins than the other routes as well. A noticeable difference across all three games is with weapon classes. Norean weapons found in Conquest are the normal Fire Emblem weapons we all know and love. Swords, lances, axes, bows, magic, and the new addition of daggers. Hoshido has counterparts to those weapons in Birthright. Instead, they have katanas, naginata, clubs, yumi, scrolls, and shuriken. No route-specific weapon is better than the other. Each counterpart has the same stats, and it only varies cosmetically, in most cases. But it adds a little flavor to the world of Fates and its units that it would otherwise lack. As a quick aside, I'd also like to bring up the Heirs of Fate DLC.
I shall tell you a story of another realm that I will never forget.
I mentioned earlier that Awakening doesn't do much to dive into the second-gen characters' backstories. The DLC, meant to extrapolate on their lives, future past, is trying to expand upon the events that led up to Lucina coming back in time, but the child units are overshadowed by the existence of the first-gen units in the DLC. None of the kids really get their time to shine. In Heirs of Fate, however, the point was to tell a story from an alternate timeline where all of the first-generation units were dead, so the kids were on their own. Since there were no first-gen units in the first place, the kids get to have their own stories and personalities truly expanded upon. They're given more room to focus on their own struggles, and we get to understand their characters far better than we did in the base game, but many people still turn their noses up at the DLC since, at first glance, it's sort of the same idea as Awakening's future past. Side note, make sure you hop on the 3DS eShop and get all the DLC you need since the eShop will be going on in March 2023! My next points are kind of random, and I didn't really have any good places to slot them in, but they're still relevant. Fates has one of the best OSTs of any Fire Emblem game, period. We all know Lost in Thoughts All Alone is a banger, but the fact that we also get Matt Mercer singing it in the Heirs of Fate DLC?
You are the ocean's great waves.
I mean, come on! And don't even get me started on Far Dawn, Justice R.I.P., Dusk Falls, or A Dark Fall. Oh my god, I'm gonna start crying over Fate's music again. Also, people give it so much shit, but Phoenix mode was a good addition. For those that don't know, that was a mode added where if a unit fell in battle, they would come back at full health the next turn, instead of at the start of the next battle in casual mode, or losing them permanently in classic mode. Sometimes babies, like me, aren't as good as a tactician as we want to be, and sometimes we need our hands held on certain maps. I had to turn on Phoenix mode to beat the last map of Revelation. Do not come for me. Also, the multiplayer aspect in Fates is awesome. The ability to see other players' castles when you visit them on Street Pass, look at their units and team builds, fight them, and get otherwise route-locked materials and weapons is just cool. My Kana from my second run of Birthright when I married Saizo had a +7 silver sword called the Bootleg Yato just because I could. Also, spouse bonding got me really feeling all ooey gooey inside. I am 100% one of those people that's angry that the North American localization took out the skinship minigame from unit bonding. These tiny interactions let you connect further with your favorite characters, and there's something so charming about checking back into your castle and finding that your spouse had brought you flowers or they'd fallen asleep and you get to wake them up. Last, personal skills in Fates are so much fun. I didn't realize that these special skills that every unit had were unit-specific until well after I played the game, such as Siegbert's Gallant skill boosting the stats of female allies, or Kana's Draconic Air allowing him to heal HP every turn that he has his Dragonstone equipped. To quote a friend, personal skills are niche, but help every single unit feel unique, even outside of their classes and their supports, ensuring no one feels identical. I really do love Fates, even though I and a lot of others give it flack. It might be because it was my second Fire Emblem game after first getting into the series with Awakening, but if the gameplay wasn't at least a little bit good, I probably would have abandoned the series. Now, 7 years after its release, I'm still psychoanalyzing Kana and Siegbert in an online writing group. I'd like to give special thanks to Tsu, Anne, Ren, Athena, and everyone else who helped me organize my thoughts for this video. Now, please go buy Revelation while you still can, because once the eShop is gone, the entire route will be lost to the ether.